Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got something really special to look at, an English workbook made just for grade 5 students in Sri Lanka's Pirivena. These are traditional monastic schools. We're going to dive into how it pulls off teaching a global language right in the heart of a deeply traditional setting.
Okay, so to really get what this workbook is all about, you have to understand the history behind the word Pirivena. As the Minister of Education points out here, we're not just talking about schools. These are ancient centers of learning, totally foundational to Sri Lankan culture, educating both monks and lay students for centuries.
And this brings us right to the core challenge, doesn't it? It's the big question this whole workbook is trying to answer. It's a real balancing act. How do you open up a window to the rest of the world through English without letting go of the values and identity that make Pirivena education so unique?
So to really unpack this workbook, we've got to start with the vision. What were the creators thinking? What was the philosophy, the big idea they were trying to bring to life with this book? Now this is what's really fascinating. The ambition here is huge. The Director of Education for Pirivena is making it absolutely clear. This isn't just about learning English grammar. The real goal is to equip these students, many of whom are young monks, to actually engage with and understand our interconnected world. And here's the other side of that coin, right? It's not about throwing out tradition. Not at all. It's about updating it. The whole idea is to weave in modern teaching methods to make this classical education even more powerful and relevant for today's world. And this slide, it just lays it all out perfectly. Think of the workbook as a bridge. On one side, you have the absolute pillars of Pirivena education, ethics, discipline, religion. And on the other, you've got the essential skills for the 21st century, English, understanding global needs, and modern ways of learning. Okay, so that's the philosophy, but how does it actually play out in the lessons themselves? How does this workbook manage to teach English in a way that truly connects with a student at a Pirivena?
You know, you can tell a lot just by glancing at the unit titles. The lessons aren't about random, generic stuff. They're grounded in topics that are immediately familiar and deeply meaningful to these young monks and students, things like Buddha's disciples and cultural festivals. This makes learning English feel relevant, not like some totally foreign subject. Let's really zoom in on one example from the very first unit, because this is where you can see the magic happen. The lesson isn't just, learn how to write a story. Nope, it's way smarter than that. So, instead of just making up some random story, students are given these key historical and religious facts about the arrival of the sacred bow sapling. Then, they use these facts to build a narrative. You see what's happening here? This is so much more than a language exercise. For these young students, it's an act of retelling their own sacred history, but doing it in English. It's powerful stuff. Okay, so we've established the content is super culturally relevant. But what about the how? How is it actually taught? Let's take a look at the different kinds of exercises and activities that fill up these lessons. Here we see something that's just incredibly practical. English is a global language, right? So the workbook actually teaches the differences between British and American words. It's getting these students ready for real-world conversations where they could run into either one. But the learning goes way deeper than just vocabulary lists. You've got exercises like this one on Proverbs, which connect the language to bigger ideas about wisdom, morality, and working together. Themes that, line up perfectly with the ethical foundations of a Peruvian education. And when it comes to the real nuts and bolts of grammar, the approach is just so clear and simple. Take the tag question. Instead of some long, complicated explanation, the book just breaks it down with this super easy-to-understand definition. And of course, it doesn't just stop at the definition. Right after they learn what it is, students get to put it into practice. This exercise has them correcting sentences, making that rule they just learned really stick. It's a simple but brilliant loop. Learn the rule, then use the rule. All right, so we've looked at the big idea behind it, the culturally rooted lessons, and the hands-on exercises. So what's the final verdict on this workbook? The true genius of this workbook is how it braids all of these different elements together so perfectly. It's not just a language textbook, it's a carefully crafted tool that honors the world these students come from, while at the same time preparing them for the wider world. It validates their identity while building their skills. And that really leaves us with this final thought, doesn't it? This workbook makes a powerful case that learning a global language doesn't mean you have to leave your own heritage behind. In fact, it can become the very thing that helps you understand, share, and build a bridge from your world to the entire world.